residing in Australia for a very long time. Having his background in engineering and finance, and then he took ordination in Australia and have been staying in Buddha monastery. And it's very, very special to have Ajahn here. He's a Sutta teacher for the monks, also teach Vinaya, which is the rules of discipline, and also the Pali teacher. 3 major subjects. And we are very privileged and thankful for him to come here all the way to teach us lay people Sutta, the words of the Buddha, inspired that I have, inspiring all of us in our practice. I think the latest work that Ajahn Brahmali has been doing is one of the major contributors to Anguttara Nikaya with Bhikkhu Bodhi. So the latest Anguttara Nikaya, quite a bit of it has been worked on by Ajahn Brahmali. And if you have that copy, you know the author is here. Yeah, I think everyone's here now. Without further ado, let's put our palms together and invite Ajahn Brahmali to take us through this Sutta workshop weekend. Thank you. Sa.
Retreat. It's amazing how much you can pack into a short retreat when you look at that program. There's a lot of things out there, which is just great. It's quite intensive. You need to raise the mic.
The mic is too far away.
Far away.
Yes. The water. It's still not ideal. It's got to be higher. It's got to be like 2 inches away from the mouth.
Oh, really?
Maybe instead a little bit of.
Can you hear the back? Can you hear the back?
Yes. How's this?
Is this for the recording?
No.
Then why don't we use the other mic?
Oh, you can put it out.
Yes.
Or you want to leave it
Sorry.
That's as high as you can go, like a walk or something. Just a little bit up a little
Yeah,
bit.
walks in a little bit.
Just a little bit up a bit.
Yeah.
Or, yeah, understand.
They had all the heroes in them.
Yeah. Go inside. And the mic has to be right angle to the mouth. That's when it gives the best outcome. Yes, right angle.
Like this.
No, the other way. Yeah. Directly. So that Ajahn speaks directly to the mic. That gives the best outcome. It's too low. It's too low. Yeah.
It's sort of like
Higher.
that.
No, a little deeper, a little fuller. Show a bit higher. Might a bit higher. Just a little bit.
Okay. Speech.
Yes.
How's that? Okay. Is this good? Everybody hear that?
Yeah.
Everybody can't hear that? Yes. Okay, good.
This is not a good mic. Where do you put it? This one has got a. Is that better? Sounds not very good.
Roger?
Yeah.
Is it good?
Yeah. Usually on top of it. Yeah.
Is that right? Yeah.
That's a good
Okay.
question.
Okay. Good. Oops. Okay. Okay. So let's start from the beginning. So welcome again, everyone. The idea behind this workshop is basically to get an introduction to the word of the Buddha, not just an introduction, also sometimes a deepening understanding of what the word of the Buddha is all about. And one of the, there's a number of things to be said about that, but one of the important things for me is to be practical about the Buddha's teachings. It's not going to be just purely theoretical, kind of, how does things work in a theoretical manner. One of the things about the teachings of the Buddha is that they're always very practical. They're about how to live your life, and how to improve your level of happiness, how to be more content, how to go away from suffering in life. It's how we apply ourselves, right? How we actually live our lives. I think it's very important that when we read the word of the Buddha, that we actually think of the word of the Buddha in these terms. How can we use it? How can we actually apply this in our own lives? It's so important, rather than just being, theoretical Buddhists who think about the teachings, because then it doesn't really have an effect at all. It doesn't really matter so much. This is one other thing, I think one of the beautiful differences between the Buddha's teachings and many other spiritual or religious teachings. And many teachings are just about faith. You have faith in something, and then everyone's happy if you have faith. It's like having the most numbers, right? The Buddha's teaching is different. It's not faith or confidence is important, it matters. But it matters only insofar as it actually makes you act and do the right thing in the world. That is what faith really matters. Confidence actually matters. If it doesn't make you do anything, then in Buddhism it's really irrelevant. It's how we act, how we are, that actually makes a good Buddhist. Because this is the whole purpose of the Buddhist teaching is to transform you from the inside, to change your mind, and to make you into a different person. It's not about having numbers. It's not about being this, having lots of Buddhists around it. It's how we are that actually matters. So for that reason, it's going to be a practical suttas and how to apply ourselves to daily life. And remember, when we talk about practical Buddhism is not just about meditation practice, right? Practical Buddhism is much more than that. It's about our inner life. What is your inner life like? It's about your habits, your personality, your character as a person. This is what practical Buddhism is about. You want to transform your character. You want to change yourself into something new, something different, something more peaceful, something more beautiful, something that is a benefit both to yourself and also to all the people around you. That you become a blessing in the world, right? Isn't that great to be a blessing in the world? Rather than dragging everybody down, you're lifting everybody up, including yourself. That is what everything becomes very wonderful when that happens. So, this is what the idea behind this is, and sometimes I find it very inspiring to read the word of the Buddha. There are so many teachings out in the world, this teacher, that teacher, and all the way around, but there is really only one teacher at the end of the day who is the foundation stone of all of Buddhism. And that, of course, is the Buddha himself. One of the things that I've always noticed in my life is that when you ask people who's their teacher, they say, oh, my teacher is Sayadaw so-and-so, it's Ajahn so-and-so, right, it's Bhante so-and-so. Everybody has his teacher, but nobody says that the Buddha is my teacher. And yet the Buddha is the only teacher that we all have in common, right? The Buddha is the only one who stands behind everyone else. If you want to have direct access to these teachings, this is actually where you have that direct access. I'm not suggesting that you should never listen to other teachers, to modern teachers. Please do so. That's important too. But what I'm saying is that at the end, the final analysis, so to speak, these are the teachings that are the most important ones. And these are the teachings which all other teachings must relate to. They have to be judged in comparison to these particular teachings. This is why the word of the Buddha is so profound. You never really know the teaching of another monk or nun or lay person. You can never be 100% sure whether you're getting the real thing. But this must be the real thing, right? If this is the real thing, then nothing is the real thing. So this has got to be the real thing. So this is why, personally, I find this thing so powerful. So hopefully, I will be able to share some of that power with you, and you get some feeling yourself for the beauty of this teaching. Thank you very much, Alvin. Very kind of you. Thank you for the generosity. Thank you. So that's somebody practicing right even before we started. Good, okay. Okay, so this is a very, very brief introduction about what these teachings are all about. And I would like you to enjoy this retreat, right? So this is so important to me that we should enjoy this kind of thing, right? Enjoy the teachings, enjoy sitting on the chair doing a bit of meditation. It should be a happy occasion when we do this kind of thing. So I want you to be relaxed, I want you to feel good, and also I want you to be stimulated by the teachings of the Buddha. If we can get those three things together, then we will grow in Buddhism. So it's very nice to see people sitting on chairs. Please don't be shy about sitting on chairs. They are there for a reason. Most of us have grown up sitting on chairs. It's very hard to sit on the floor, right? So please be comfortable, be relaxed. And as part of this, I want to do a little bit of meditation on this retreat as well. So what I plan to do is to do Sutta readings, and then I want to do a little bit of meditation in between. More Sutta readings, a bit of meditation, so that we don't actually sit listening to me for too long. If you listen to one person too long, after a while you might start to wonder and you think about all kinds of other stuff, right? It's very hard to be focused. It's true for all of us. It's very hard to be focused for long periods of time. So just by doing 10 minutes of meditation every 20 minutes, every half an hour or so, it gives you time to relax, to be at ease, and then to allow the things that I'm talking about to sink in, right? Instead of just getting overloaded with information, you can't really make use of it properly. So this is what I want to do. Like, during this meditation, at least initially, I will just guide you a little bit, and really all you should do during meditation time is just to relax, just to be easy, and just to kind of feel at ease, feel good where you are. That's the most important thing. And then hopefully, by doing it this way, you will have more benefit from this retreat, and you'll also learn more about the Buddha's teaching at the same time. So, okay. So let us just start off by doing a little bit of meditation first of all, just 10 minutes, and I will just give you a little bit of guidance so that you know roughly what to do when we do the meditation. Always start every meditation by focusing on your body and by being aware of your body, and then you find out very quickly whether you are relaxed and whether you are at ease. And the first benefit of meditation is always just to relax the body and to feel at ease and to feel good about yourself. Then, when you feel your body, then you can feel if you're not 100% relaxed. If you're not 100% relaxed, take the beginning of every meditation you ever do, just to relax, just to feel at ease. Never go straight to the breath. If you go straight to the breath, you can find so much suffering in meditation practice. Instead, just relax first of all. So if you have an tension anywhere in the stomach, in the shoulders, and in the face, whatever it is, just breathe in deeply and allow the tension to dissipate as you breathe out. just keep on staying in your body and making sure that you're really relaxed and don't do anything else until the body is 100% at ease. And the way to know that the body is at ease is when the body fades into the background and the body starts to become irrelevant. If you can still feel the body feeling, it usually means it's not 100% relaxed. So one of the ways of relaxing the body is to have a little bit of metta towards your body. Thank you, body, for looking after me all these years. Now it's my time to look after you. May you be happy. May you be well. May you be relaxed. Okay. So the first sutta for today is called the short sutta on the simile of the elephant's footprint. And this particular sutta is called, what the sutta presents is something known as the gradual training. The gradual training in the Buddha's teaching it basically shows you how you train from the very beginning, from the very start, when you start becoming a Buddhist, all the way until you attain full awakening. It shows the whole training that you have to do from the beginning of the path to the end. And it's a very useful type of teaching. And what you find, what is interesting about this, is that of all the teachings in the suttas, this is probably the one that you see most often. It occurs again and again in the suttas. And of course, if a teaching occurs again and again in the suttas, what does that mean? It must mean that for the Buddha, this was a very important teaching, right? It was on many different occasions he would teach this precise teaching. So if you want to ask yourself, what is the most important teaching of the Buddha? It is basically the thing that he repeats over and over and over again. So I think it is fair to say that this then is an example of one of the most important teachings of the Buddha, simply because it occurs so regularly in the suttas. And you can see why, because it gives you this beautiful overview of the whole path, from the beginning and all the way to the end. So this sutta is going to be like a framework for this short retreat. So this is going to be like in the background all the time. And then some of the other suttas will then fit into this. And it will show you how these other suttas actually work together with this gradual training to give you a full overview and understanding of the Buddhist path. So let us have a look at the sutta and see how it starts off and how it progresses. Okay, so I will read out and I will comment on these things after I have read part of this out. Okay, so this sutta begins at the very beginning. I've taken out a large part with a very long introduction there. But basically, it begins with somebody who hears about the Buddha, and then after hearing about the Buddha, they get so inspired that they want to go and see the Buddha, right? And then the Buddha gives them a teaching. And this is the teaching that the Buddha basically gives to this particular Brahmin. This is what he says. So too, Brahmin. This is the reason it says so too is because the Buddha is using the idea of an elephant's footprint, right? The idea of an elephant's footprint is basically, if you see an elephant's footprint, you can deduce probably there was an elephant here. Cannot be 100% sure what kind of elephant. If the elephant footprint is big, we think possibly, most likely it was a large elephant. But again, you cannot be 100% sure. And then you keep following the footprint all the way until you actually see this elephant for yourself. And when you see the elephant for yourself, that is when you actually know that this is a large elephant, which accords with that particular footprint. And in the same way, the Buddha says, in the practice of a Buddhist, you start off by hearing Buddha's teachings and you think, wow, this is a large elephant, right? The word in Pali, naga, elephant, is the same word you can use for an elephant as for a great human being. So the Buddha is almost like an elephant in that sense. It's like something big, right? Something big in the spiritual sense. And you hear the teaching, but only when you actually walk to the end of the path yourself can you know that the Buddha was the real thing, that he actually knew what he was talking about. Initially, it's just a matter of confidence. So this is what the Buddha says. So, to Brahmin, here a Tathagata appears in the world, accomplished, fully enlightened, perfect in true knowledge and conduct, sublime, knower of the world, incomparable, leader of tameable persons, teacher of gods and human, awakened, blessed. He declares this world with its gods, its brahmas, its maras, its veneration, with its recluses and brahmins, its princes and its people, which he has himself realized with direct knowledge. He teaches the Dhamma good in the beginning, good in the middle, and good in the end, with the right meaning and phrasing, and he reveals a holy life, the brahmacharya, that is utterly perfect and pure. Wow, so again, that's the introductory paragraph. And that paragraph is so full of meaning. You can probably spend 2 hours just talking about that paragraph. There's so much meaning in this particular paragraph that I'm going to go through it fairly quickly, but still, it's very, very beautiful and very meaningful. Actually, one thing I should say is that we're going to have Q&As in the evening, the last thing of the day, I think. Is that quite right, yeah? Is there anywhere people can write down the questions? There is. Okay, you have talked about that already? Yeah? Okay, great, yeah. Okay, excellent, yeah, wonderful. So there will be a chance to write down the questions. Sometimes it's nice to write down the questions. Sometimes we can do it orally, but it's nice to write down. And you can write down, whenever it comes to mind, you can write it down. You don't have to wait till the end of the session. Then you may have forgotten the question already, right? So much new information there. So then we can just take those questions in the evening. Okay. So, the first thing the Buddha says here is that the Tathagata appears in the world. And this first paragraph, or this first sentence here, which starts with the Tathagata, starts just after that, to the blessed, enlightened and blessed. This is a standard thing that we chant when we chant the homage to the Buddha. Iti piso bhagavan arahan. You know that chant, right? This is what that is. So this is the actual recollection of the Buddha. It's very useful to know what this means. So when you chant that, you just don't chant the Pali, but you actually have a sense for the meaning behind the words. Then it becomes so powerful, because you're actually reflecting what it means to be a Buddha, what it means to have a Buddha as a teacher. And that's much more beautiful than just doing the Pali chanting by itself. This is what we're doing, looking at right now, that particular chant. So Tathagata appears in the world, right? What does that mean? Tathagata appears in the world. It sounds a bit mystical. To me, it sounds a bit like, oh, it appears. What does that mean? It appears, kind of comes out of nowhere and suddenly appears in the world, right? That sounds a bit like that. So you have to be careful and not to read too much into these words. Basically, all it means, Tathagata appears in the world, this means that some human being somewhere is able to penetrate to reality and then see things for they actually are. That's what it means, the Tathagata appearing in the world. It doesn't mean anything more than that. And it can be anyone, right? Why is it that the Tathagata appears in the world anyway? What are the causes, what are the conditions that lead to this? I think the truth is, from the viewpoint of the suttas, of course, if you look at Mahayana Buddhism, or you look at Theravada developments later on, they talk about the Bodhisattva path and all these things. But there is no Bodhisattva path according to the very suttas. It doesn't exist. The Buddha himself never talks about the Bodhisattva path. So if there is no path, how can the Tathagata arise in the world? It seems simply to be that occasionally there will be a being for whom the causes and conditions are such that the wisdom just ripens to the point where they're able to see things as they actually are. And this can happen to any one of us, right? Anyone here could become a Buddha. But the mistake is to think that there is a path, that there isn't really a path. Just that the cause and conditions happen, and eventually, because the cause and conditions being right for that person, then someone is able to break through and understand the world as it actually is. And because it is just a matter of the right cause and condition, it means that occasionally there will be someone who breaks through, right? Occasionally, every now and again, there will be some person who is able to see things as they actually are. And that's why the Buddhist idea is of one Buddha coming, then the sasana, the Buddha's teaching disappears, and another Buddha appears in the future. The sasana disappears again, another Buddha appears eventually. And this will happen according to whenever someone is able to break through and understand the world as it actually is. It's a pretty random thing, right? It's just happened. You can't predict this thing because the cause and conditions coming together. And of course, that means that when we have the teaching here, when it's available for us, we have to take the opportunity because we don't know when it's going to come around again in the future. Sometimes people get into this kind of Maitreya worship. Oh, Maitreya is going to come. May I be reborn at the time of Maitreya. It's a nice idea, but we just don't know when it's going to be, right? We don't know whether we're going to be here. Are you going to be here when Maitreya is here? Maybe if you're a very good Buddhist in this life, you can be one in nice heavenly realm, you chill out in the mansion. And when Maitreya comes, you think, oh, whatever, I had such a good time anyway. What's the point of seeing Maitreya? Right? This is what happens. This is just the reality of the world. And anyway, if you are are you sure you will be able to recognize Maitreya when he arrives in the world? Will you know that this is Maitreya the Buddha? Maybe when you see this Buddha, most people at the time of the Buddha, they just dismiss the Buddha as, I'm not interested in that, Buddhism is not for me, other people can be Buddhists but not me. And this is what could happen to us, right? Are we spiritually mature enough to be able to recognize the Buddha that comes around? There's so many unknowns, so many uncertainties. All we do know is that now we have the teaching, now is the time, now a Buddha has arisen in the world. Gautama Buddha is around. Don't dismiss Gautama Buddha and then look at some pie in the sky, some uncertainty in the future, and think that is going to save you. Now is the opportunity. Now is the time to put into practice. This is such an important thing. I always feel a bit dispirited when I hear people saying, I'm going to be reborn at the time of Maitreya. We build all these statues everywhere of Maitreya the Buddha. The intention is good, but sometimes I wonder if it is wise. It shifts the focus away from what we have onto something which is uncertain in the future. There will be a Buddha in the future, no doubt, but there's so many uncertainties around that. So this is the importance, right? The target that appears in the world. There's something urgent there, something powerful. Now is the time to do something here. Another thing about this idea of the Tathagata appearing in the world, and what is important here, that what I just mentioned before, this is the beginning of the gradual training, right? So this is the training that we have to do to become awakened. Now it's quite interesting that the gradual training begins with the Tathagata arising in the world. The gradual training doesn't begin with, being kind and moral. Of course, that's important as well. But it begins with the Tathagata arising in the world. So what does that mean? What it means is that there is no gradual training unless the Tathagata is there. Unless there is a Buddha there, there is no gradual training, right? It depends on the arising of a Buddha in the world. Only then does this gradual training actually appear there. And again, what that means is that, again, from the early Buddhist point of view, this means that there isn't really any such thing as a Bodhisattva path. Because a Bodhisattva path is someone who trains outside of the Buddha's teachings. But when there is no Buddha's teachings, when the Buddha isn't there isn't any gradual training. There is no progress to be made, right? Because you don't really know what to do then. You have no insight into no self. You have no insight into all these things. So there isn't. So Bodhisattva is more like this random figure who happens to do what is right, but doesn't really have a clear guidance. So if you succeed as a Bodhisattva, it is often a little bit random. If you don't succeed, well then that is usually what is to be expected. So this is kind of the early Buddhist idea, right? You need that input from someone who has seen reality for the path even to exist. There is no path if there is no Buddha there, because you don't have anything to follow. All you have to follow are other religions, other spiritual practices, but you have no clarity about what you're doing here. So this is very important, right? This very little phrase at the beginning there, the Tathagata appears in the world, that this is like the beginning of Buddhism. This is so important and so essential. Okay, so that's wonderful that there is a Tathagata in the world, but let's see what else it says here. So remember, we are now looking at the Iti-Piso formula, right? And the rest of that formula is, he's accomplished, it's an Arahant, right? Arahant, accomplished, fully enlightened, Samma Sambuddha, perfect in true knowledge and conduct, Vijja Charana Sampanno, right? I'm sure you remember these words. Sublime, Sugato, Lokavidu, knower of the worlds, Anuttaro, how's it go again? Anuttaro Buddhisa Dhammasarati, right? Yeah, the comparable leaders of tameable persons. So you can see all the things coming down there. So let me just comment briefly on this. I'm not going to say anything about Arahant or fully awakened. I prefer the idea of awakening rather than enlightened, because for me the idea of awakened is more meaningful than enlightened. It means I can wake up and say, wow, now I understand, right? And this is a kind of metaphor and usage you see in the sutras, this idea of awakening, this idea of the darkness being dispelled, of seeing the light, right? So awakening is very meaningful. And to me, And the word Buddha actually does mean quite literally to be awake. That's what it means. It means awakened. It doesn't mean enlightened, it means awakened. Some of the European languages, because remember that Indian language is a part of this large language group called the Indo-European languages. They're all related to each other. And some of the languages, in particular in Eastern Europe, they still, when they use the word to be awake, they use the word Buddha when they're awake. So you go to Russia, the Russians use the word Buddha to mean awake. So it's quite interesting, isn't it? You can see the connection there. You are Buddha? No. Yes, you are. You're awake. No. Okay, so that is the meaning of the word Buddha. Then we have perfectly true knowledge and conduct. Vicca, Chetawan Sampano. Vicca here, true knowledge, is of course the higher knowledges in Buddhism. The idea of remembering your past lives, right? The three Vicas. The idea of understanding the laws of karma, and finally the idea of awakening itself. The awakening itself is like understanding the Four Noble Truths, understanding non-self, understanding impermanence, understanding suffering. The idea of awakening is a very broad thing. There's many aspects to that. And the interesting thing here, I think, is the fact that this true knowledge, when you see things as they actually are, when you have an insight into reality, it not only has an effect personally, it's not just that you suddenly see the world differently, there's also an external effect for that, right? Conduct also changes. The way you act as a person in the world becomes different. So that's why true knowledge and conduct always goes together. These are not separate things. Your inner life is reflected in how you act. So a person who has true knowledge, this is actually very important. A person who really has true knowledge will act in a new way, act in a different way. You will be a different person externally after you have seen the truth. I mean, remember that, because what it means that there is an opportunity for us to actually see who has some deep insight, right? It's not random. It's not as if you have crazy wisdom and then afterwards you do all kind of crazy things. That's not really how it works, right? If you have a true insight into reality, you become wise. You start to you act with kindness. You have metta. You have compassion. You will be peaceful, right? You will act in peaceful ways. You will be able to enter samadhi very easily. You will meditate very profoundly all the time. You will have all these qualities. You will have no anger. You will not have any kind of bad desires. You won't be deluded. So you can watch a person and you can see. And this is the beauty of it, the fact that knowledge and conduct go together. You can actually observe. You can have some idea who is on the right path and who is not. And sometimes I find people often too naive, too afraid of actually looking and see what's there. Often people say, oh yeah, he's actually enlightened, just a little bit, this is what enlightened people like, they do crazy things sometimes. So, don't sort of worry too much about that. The point is, if you are enlightened, you might do something which are a little bit strange, but you're not going to do things that are outrightly wrong, right? And sometimes I've heard people saying, oh yeah, he sort of punches people a little bit in the face sometimes when he gets upset, but he's actually enlightened, No, you don't do that. You don't punch people in the face or do naughty things if you are awakened. That's impossible because you have no anger. There's nothing inside of you that can drive that kind of action anymore. So conduct is important. This is what you are seeing here now. Conduct and true knowledge coming together. Okay. You are sublime, sugato, basically literally means well gone is the Pali word. Su, well, go is gone, agato is gone. It basically means that you have attained a good destination, right? It's well gone. You are knower of the world, and that is an important one. You understand the world, you understand the extent of the world, and implied is also the idea of understanding rebirth and karma. I'll get back to this in a second because there's more underneath that this. You are the incomparable leaders of tameable persons. So I like this idea of persons to be tamed. It says you have to tameable persons is better. And this is the point here, is that some people can be tamed, and some people just cannot be tamed, right? You're not tameable. So what are the person that can be tamed. Well, the person that are tameable are the people who get some confidence in the Buddha's teachings, right? People who are able to reflect and to look at these things. They are the tameable people. People who kind of reject Buddhism straight away and say that this isn't right, or they're not interested. Basically, you're not tameable because you cannot even move in that direction. Tameable means that you have some grasp of these spiritual matters, that you have some understanding that this is important and this matters. That's really all it means. And then you have a chance of moving in the right direction until eventually, hopefully, you reach awakening. These are tameable people. And sometimes in the sutras you have the idea, the simile of the taming of the animals, right? The taming of people is like taming of animals. You're taming yourself, taming your mind, getting rid of the defilements. As long as you're untamed, means your mind is just running all over the place, thinking about this, thinking about that, and your mind is kind of out of control. You try to meditate. I can't meditate, I can just think all the time. What am I supposed to do? Everybody is like that. Wherever you go in the world, when you teach meditation, everybody says, oh, thinking too much. It's because the mind is untamed, right? The mind is just doing its own stuff. And there's nothing much you can do about it. It's gradually changing these things. So the Buddha is the incomparable leader of persons to be tamed. This, of course, is precisely because the Buddha has awakened to the truth. And I was telling people yesterday, many of you were there yesterday at the talk last night, and it's a bit like when you want to do something in this world, you have to have right understanding in this world as well. If you want to succeed in this world, you have to do things in the right way. If you want to go down to the corner shop to buy yourself breakfast, you have to know where the corner shop is, right? If you have the wrong view where the corner shop is, and you kind of think, well, the corner shop is over there, I'll just walk down there, but there is no corner shop there. And that wrong view leads to your suffering because you're not going to get your breakfast there. Because that wrong view leads to suffering. If you know where the corner shop is, if you have the right view about the corner shop, you go down there, you get your breakfast, then that leads to happiness because you have a right view. Very small happiness, right? Tiny little happiness. But still, everybody likes their breakfast. And it's exactly the same thing in the Dhamma. You have to actually have a right view to be able to do things in the right way. So the Buddha is the one who gives us this right view. He has understood it, then he can tell us about the right view, then he can give us a sense of driving us in the right direction. And this is why the Buddha is often called in the sutras, it's called the eye of the world, right? Because he has seen that. And for everyone else who hasn't seen, he's the one who actually understands and is able to take you in the same direction. The Buddha is the eye of the world. And hopefully the idea is that we also can get eyes eventually by practicing this path. That's why he's the incomparable leader. And of course, the other thing about the Buddha, I always like to reflect about the Buddha in these two ways. The Buddha is the eye of the world. He has understood happiness and suffering to the full extent that it is possible to understand happiness and suffering. Right? That's very important, isn't it? And what do we all want? We all want to be happy. We all want not to have suffering. And here is a person who has understood this to the full depth, to the absolute limit, how it's possible to understand happiness and suffering. It's incredibly powerful when you think about that. It's what drives us every day. It's all the desires inside of us, all the cravings we have, everything, all the intentions that we have in life are basically about finding some kind of satisfaction and happiness in the world. Our whole human life, not just human, animals, ghosts, spirits, devas, any living being, any living entity is driven by this, right? Always searching for contentment, searching for happiness, searching for something, and never really finding it. Dying, when we die, often we still have that craving inside of us. That's why we have to go continue around. And now here is someone who has found the answer, right? He's found the answer. This is the thing that we all want. This is the thing kind of deep inside of us, which always drives us around. And he has found the answer to this. Isn't that extremely powerful? To me, it's like, when you realize, wow, this is just astonishing. Nobody else is able to tell you about these things. Nowhere else you find the teaching which is so complete in this respect, where the idea of the highest happiness and getting away from suffering is at the very center of what this teaching is about, right? He has found the answer to this. This is the answer to the meaning of life. This is what we're all searching for. If you look at your heart, what drives you in life, this is the answer to that meaning of life. This is why he is incomparable, because he has found what everyone is looking for. And other side of the Buddha, which comes from that, which makes him an incomparable teacher, is that because he has understood what human beings all desire, what we're all looking for, of course he also has immense compassion at the same time. He sees the suffering of human beings, he sees the problems that we have, and he knows that we all want to go in that direction towards happiness, but we're not able to. We are blinded, we are deluded, we are hindered by craving, etc. all the time. So because of that, he gets compassion. He sees the suffering in all beings everywhere. He sees the suffering. He sees the striving, the wanting to go there, but the inability to get there. This is like the tragedy of our existence, that we want to go there, but we're not able to. And now someone comes who can show us the way. So, there is that connection there. There is that connection between awakening, understanding the truth, and then the compassion arising, right? Having compassion for people. And when you think about the consequences of that, the consequences that the Buddha was a person with the highest compassion, it means that when you read the suttas, you're reading the consequences of that compassion. You're reading the teaching of someone who has understood happiness and suffering to its full depth, and is then teaching that out of compassion for humanity, compassion for anyone who's capable of understanding it. So it's something powerful behind that, right? This is what we're reading at these teachings that have this depth of understanding that are derived from compassion at the end of the day. Very powerful, very beautiful. So this is why the Buddha is the incomparable leader of capable people. So you still have these two things here. There's a beautiful side, there's a beautiful teaching of the Buddha, and the other side is also your personal qualities. You also have to be ready to some extent. If you're not ready, you won't be able to take it on board. Two things coming together. Okay. So that is that one. Then we have the teachers of gods and humans, Satta, Deva, Manusana. And maybe the most important point there is that sometimes you hear that you're supposed to be reborn in the human realm because human realm is the best place to be. Perhaps I'm not 100% sure, but the point, the Buddha doesn't actually say anywhere that we should strive to be reborn as humans. It doesn't actually say anywhere in the Sutta. But what it says is that the Buddha is a teacher of gods and humans. So even if you go to the Deva Loka, you still get a chance to hear the Buddha's teachings. And one of the great advantages, actually, that sutta is not in here, but it comes to mind now when I'm saying this, when the Buddha talks about the benefits of reading the suttas. And one of the great benefits of reading the suttas is that you understand the word of the Buddha. And then when you get reborn again in the future, when somebody is teaching the word of the Buddha, even in the heavenly realm, you think, wait a minute, I've heard this somewhere else before, right? You hear the teachings, because the teachings have gone deep inside of you. You recognize them when you get reborn in the future, even in the heavenly realm. It says that somewhere in the Suttas, one of the benefits of understanding the teaching of the Buddha properly. Now, if all you ever do is listen to this teacher, that teacher, then when you get reborn in the heavenly realm, you may not be able to recognize the teaching of the Buddha. Because sometimes people use this very idiomatic and idiosyncratic language, which the Buddha didn't use. So maybe you will lose out. But if you actually read the word of the Buddha, you understand that, you will be able to recognize it in the future, even if you are reborn in a heavenly realm. Okay, awakened and blessed, enlightened and blessed are the second last qualities here of the Buddha. I'm not sure if we need to talk too much about that. Okay, so that is the first part of this paragraph. You can see how full it is in meaning, right? How much meaning, how much beautiful meaning there is in there. So whenever you chant the Gita Song, remember this meaning. Sometimes have the English text there with you, next to the Pali, so you know what you're chanting. You try to bring some of these things to mind, and it makes it so real, it makes it so beautiful, and it makes you feel peaceful, it makes you feel relaxed. And when the chanting makes you peaceful, when the chanting makes you feel good, then it has a very powerful purpose. And then when you meditate afterwards, wow, you go so much more deeply in your meditation afterwards. Okay, so let us take a short break of meditation because otherwise it's going to be overloaded. So, about 10 minutes, and then we'll start again afterwards. those are the qualities of the Buddha when the Buddha appears in the world. So that is the first reflection. And the second reflection here is then about the Dhamma, right? What does it teach? Okay, so here is this person with this amazing understanding and insight there. The next thing here is about what he actually teaches, how he gives that out to other people. And the first thing here is that he says he declares this world with its God and its Maras, its Brahmas, this generation with its recluses and Brahmins, its princes and people, which he has himself realized with direct knowledge. And of course the important point here is that precisely that he has realized it himself with direct knowledge, right? It's not something that he has heard, it's not something that he has taken on board from other teachers, it's not part of just the tradition of India at the time. It is something that he has seen for himself. It's actually a very important thing to understand, and I will come back to that in a second. So what he declares here, he declares all of these things. What does that mean that he declares all this stuff? What it means is that he has understood the world for what it is, right? And understanding the world for what it is means to understand the kind of the scope of the world. It means understanding the potential of the world. Where is it possible to get reborn, right? What are the kind of the different realms? What is the full possibility? Sometimes if you're born as a human being, you may think that human life is the only possibility, but the scope of the universe is much more than just human life. It's much broader than that. And to be able to make a decision in life about whether you should, aim for Nibbana, or whether you should aim for this practice or that practice, you have to understand the full picture of things. If you don't have the full picture, you don't have the full information on which to make a decision. You don't really know what's going on there. So the point is making here that the Buddha has the full information, he understands the full scope, the full rebirth possibilities, and also how different karmas lead to rebirth in the different realms. This is what is implied by this, understanding the world as it actually is. And then you are able to make a informed decision about what to do. And of course, again, the point here is that he has realized this by his own direct knowledge, right? And sometimes you will hear that the Buddha talks about rebirth, or he only talks about rebirth because that was part of the Indian culture at the time, right? Everybody said it was rebirth, so the Buddha also said it was rebirth, because he kind of took that on board, because everybody else was talking about rebirth. That's kind of the idea. But it goes against the entire Buddhist teachings. It's not that simple. And this is part of the point that is being made here. He teaches this based on his own direct realization. It's not based on hearsay. It's not based on taking a tradition on board. I was recently, only a couple of weeks ago, I was in Melbourne in Australia, and I had a debate with a man known as Stephen Batchelor. Do you know Stephen Batchelor? Yeah, he's a kind of a well-known writer in the Western Buddhist world, and he sells a lot of books in the West, and I'm sure he sells some here in Malaysia as well. And he is he calls himself a secular Buddhist, right? And the idea of secular Buddhist is like non-religious Buddhist. So he wants to create this new Buddhism for the new age, right? Strip away all the nonsense, strip away all the superstition, and get back to the core, to the things that really matter. And of course, in a way, I agree with that to some extent. We have to go back to the core. But the problem is to find a balance between what actually is that core and what is not core, and be able to take those things out that actually do matter, and don't throw away things that are important. If you throw away the things that are important, you may risk losing the whole purpose of the Buddha's teachings. And one of his ideas is this idea that, rebirth, we shouldn't believe in rebirth because it is contrary to our modern way of looking at things, right? There's a certain arrogance to that, right? It's as if in the modern world, as if we know everything, and we know everything better than everyone else. That's kind of the idea behind that. But it's good to be a bit humble about the limits of our understanding. Okay, in some areas we are successful, we have better technology now, obviously, than they had in those days. Our understanding in many scientific matters are better. But there is no reason why in the spiritual area, which does not depend on science, doesn't really depend on technology. It depends on insight into the mind. There's no reason why the ancient Indians shouldn't have had a more profound understanding than what we have now. Right? So we need a sense of humility, and this is, I think, part and parcel of what it means to be a Buddhist, right? What it means to be a Buddhist is to say that you have a certain confidence in the Buddha's teachings, in the Buddha. And it means that you are willing to listen to what the Buddha has to say and take that on board, at least as a hypothesis in the beginning. Okay, I recognize I don't know these things, but at the very least, if the Buddha said so, I will take it on board as confidence. If you reject what the Buddha said, if you reject that completely, you're not really a Buddhist anymore. This is one of the things I told Stephen Batchelor during this debate. It's quite interesting. Sometimes people think that monastic life must be incredibly boring, right? We're sitting there in the cute in the forest. Wow, it sounds so boring. But the things that we get up to sometimes are quite fascinating. This was a public debate in front of a large crowd. Stephen Batchelor was here, I was sitting there, and then we had to kind of, debate. It was a very gentlemanly debate, right? It was very, very pleasant. It wasn't like going at a shot or anything like that. But still, it's fascinating to get into this kind of thing. And this is what I told them during this debate. You cannot really call yourself a Buddhist. This is fundamental, it's integral, it's everywhere in the Buddha's teachings, this idea of rebirth. If you reject something that the Buddha very clearly must have said, you cannot call yourself a Buddhist. You can call yourself secular, you can call yourself secular with some inspiration from Buddhists, but you're not actually Buddhist. Buddhist means precisely the fact that you are willing to at least consider the things that the Buddha said, and you don't reject them out of hand. So this is one of those places in the suttas. It is not so direct here, it's a bit kind of roundabout, because it doesn't specifically talk about rebirth, although I say it is implied there. But the Buddha says it in many other places, that he actually has realized this, understands this of his own. And this is the importance of that particular passage. So Buddha here basically is teaching about rebirth and karma. And of course, for those of you who have known a little bit about the Noble Eightfold Path, you will know that this is the basic idea of right view in Buddhism, right? The right view of rebirth and karma. So what the Buddha is doing here is basically teaching you right view, how to look at the world, how to see the world in the right way. And last night I was giving a talk on filial piety, on kind of your duties towards your parents. And very interesting that in the idea of right view, the idea of karma and rebirth, this idea of filial piety actually has a separate mention in there. Generosity and filial piety, the two things that are specifically mentioned in the first factor of right view on the Noble Eightfold Path. So obviously, it's quite fascinating. It shows you how the Buddha, how important these things actually are in the realm of karma and rebirth. I'm not going to go more into that. If you're interested, you can listen to the talk I gave yesterday at some other time, if it is available then. Okay, so the Buddha is telling you right view, and then that part of that right view is a teaching of the Dhamma that is good in the beginning, good in the middle, and good in the end. Right? When you practice the Dhamma, it's always supposed to lead to happiness, a reduction in suffering, to more contentment, to a good life. That is what it basically means, that this Dhamma is good, right? It has good results. It works. It's not some kind of... it actually has a real effect on your life. And again, this is one of the things I also mentioned yesterday. You should measure that. You should see that the Dhamma actually works in your life. You should look at yourself, and you should compare yourself, what you are now compared to maybe what you were a year ago, and compare what you are now to what you will be in a year's time, and then see, has there been some development? Are you more peaceful? Have you got more mindfulness? Have you got more kindness in your heart, right? And if you see that you are developing, if you see that you are moving, improving in all the good qualities, and declining in the bad ones, that's how you know that you're going in the right direction. It's important to do that because it means that you take charge of your own spiritual life. You don't just do things blindly, but you take charge of yourself and you ask yourself the right questions. And if it's not improving, you have to ask yourself why, right? And you have to start investigating. Can I change? Is there anything I should do differently? Why is it that my mindfulness isn't developing? Why don't I feel any kinder today than I did 6 months ago, right? Then you investigate, you try to resolve the issues, and then you can move forward again. to taking responsibility. Too often, I find that in Buddhism, just like everywhere else, people place their life in the hands of teachers and gurus and whatever it is, and just follow things blindly. It is so useful to take charge of your own spiritual life. It frees you from the danger of guru worship. So much guru worship in Buddhism. Sometimes we think that there's only guru worship in Tibetan Buddhism and Mahayana. It's full of that in Chetawan Buddhism as well. It's everywhere. I think this is kind of the lazy way, right? Okay, I just go to this teacher and guru and I just subject myself to it, just do what they say. It's kind of easy but dangerous, right? Investigate for yourself. Know if it works. If you know it works, then you're on the right path. This is so important and so much part of this teaching. So it's supposed to be good in the beginning, good in the middle, good in the end. Wherever you are, the results are supposed to be good. It has the right meaning and right phrasing. Right meaning is the right goal, right atta. Pali word atta means goal, the right benefit. It takes you in the right direction. It takes you towards happiness. It takes you away from suffering. Moves you towards contentment. Right meaning. Right phrasing. In other words, the Buddha teaches the Dhamma in a very purposeful way. He teaches the Dhamma with clarity, with using, phrasing things very carefully. And what that means is that when you read the word of the Buddha, you have to be very careful not to miss things, because everything has a purpose. Every word serves a particular meaning. Nothing is really superfluous. Nothing is there without a good reason. So it has the right phrasing. It has a phrasing which also leads in the right direction. So this is one reason why it is so important to conserve the word of the Buddha as best as we can and try to find out what the Buddha actually taught. That's why it is so important to find that phrasing there. So everything matters. And he reveals a holy life that is utterly perfect and pure. The holy life is the Brahmacharya, right? Now translated by Venerable Bhikkhu as spiritual life, which I think perhaps is a better translation. It is utterly perfect and pure. It is utterly perfect because it is based on an understanding, full understanding of what leads to awakening. So it has all the factors are included. Everything you need for awakening is included. So when you read the suttas, read carefully and find out and make sure that you fulfill all the factors that are there, all the important ones. Then you are fulfilling this utterly perfect spiritual life. Right? So you read the sutta and think, okay, morality, speech, body, and then you also come to morality of mind, right? Talk about this later on. This is a very important aspect of the teachings of the Buddha, this morality and sila of the mind. And it's pure, right? It's a pure lifestyle. If you live this correctly, there is a sense of purity about that. It's an utterly pure life. In other words, you cannot actually live it any better than this. This purifies you. It takes you in the right direction. So this is a teaching that the Buddha declares to the world, and you can again see how beautiful that is. You know, all those phrases in there, all this idea of the Dhamma, it's very inspiring, isn't it? I mean, at least I find it very inspiring when I read this. So, that is the first paragraph for you. So the first paragraph, that is so much meaning in that first paragraph. And we can go even deeper if you want to into those words and contemplate these things for yourself if you like. And sometimes you might hear other nice Dhamma talks about this. And cross-reference in the suttas, when you start reading the suttas for yourself and you read them more broadly, you will gain a deeper understanding for yourself of what these things actually mean. Okay. So, paragraph 1 finished. Gee, we've got to go a bit faster, otherwise we'll be in serious trouble here. But it's good to get the foundation work done, because the foundation work is the most important part. So let's move on a little bit. Okay, so a householder or a householder's son or one born in some other clan hears that Dhamma. From hearing the Dhamma, he acquires faith in the Tathagata. Possessing that faith, he considers thus: household life is crowded and dusty. Life gone forth is wide open. It is not easy while living in a home to lead the spiritual life utterly perfect and pure as a polished shell. Suppose I shave off my hair and beard, put on the yellow robe, and go forth from home life into homelessness. On a later occasion, abandoning a small and a large fortune, abandoning a small or a large circle of relatives, he shaves off his hair and beard, puts on the yellow robe, and goes forth from the home life into homelessness. This is what happens if you are kind of ready for the Dhamma. You end up becoming a monastic. There's a couple of things that I need to point out straight away. What this means, what this is saying here, that it looks like this gradual training only applies for monastics, right? That's sort of feeling you get when you read this. But it's important not to be misled by that. And the reason why this gradual training is said to start off the ordaining is because the gradual training takes you all the way to awakening. And the end of the path, at the very end, you will become a monastic at the very end. So before you reach full awakening, or just as you reach full awakening, you will then become a monk or a nun. Because at that point, home life has become completely meaningless to you. It specifically says in the Sutta that you abandon the fetter of householdership when you reach full awakening. You no longer have an attachment. And they say that you are incapable of storing things up in the household life as you did before. But this is why the going forward is mentioned already at this point, because it has to happen somewhere during this gradual training. That doesn't mean that this gradual training is irrelevant for lay Buddhists. It's highly relevant. It just means that somewhere on this path you will end up ordaining, if you're going to go all the way to the end. So please keep that in mind, otherwise I will be wasting my time teaching this here, right? So all of this is highly relevant for everyone. The second thing which needs to be pointed out, and again this is just the way the suttas are phrased, it says here, we shave off hair and beard, right? It sort of leaves out all the women. What about the women? They have a problem, right? So again, the point is, this is a matter of expression. That it's usually in the sutta is focused on the male gender, and the reason for that is because the majority of the disciples of the Buddha were male. Often he would teach the Dhamma mostly to the male monastic, the bhikkhus, and that's why it's focused on the male gender. But we all know that there were bhikkhunis at the time of the Buddha, there were nuns. So again, it's important to understand this in the right way. It doesn't exclude women. Another reason could be that the female Sangha was actually started later than the male Sangha, right? So because it was started later, it may mean that some of this sutta was spoken before there actually was a female bhikkhuni Sangha. So again, that could be another reason. But please don't feel excluded. Sometimes it's easy to feel, oh, it doesn't relate to me, I'm excluded from this. No, you're not. And you have to, this actually goes for everyone. So please keep that in mind. Okay. So just having made those couple of points, then we go back to the beginning of this paragraph. A householder or householder son of one born in some other clan hears that Dhamma, right? So, what does that mean? Just briefly to explain the meaning of that. What is this business about householder and householder son of one born in some other clan? Basically what it means anyone, right? That's essentially what it means. Anyone who hears that Dhamma can then acquire faith or confidence in that teaching. So why is a householder and householder son specifically mentioned? Why does it just say anyone? And the reason for that, I think, is because at the time of the Buddha, the householders, these were like the establishment in society. These were the things that kept society going. A householder, somebody who had a real house, somebody who was the head of a household. These were like the pillars of society in those days. These were the people who kept society going. These were the people who had wealth, right? Who had something extra in the world. So the point here is to say that even though you were a pillar of society, even though you were part of the establishment, even though maybe you were very wealthy, and sometimes you see in the suttas people with incredible wealth, people who were famous, people who were in a high social position, people who had everything in life, they too would go forth, right? And of course that's important. That's important because the idea of the Dhamma is not just for people who are oppressed, right? I'm oppressed, I need to get away from oppression, so I will ordain into the Dhamma. If that is the purpose of the Dhamma, it kind of lowers it down. It becomes just an escape from a difficult life. The point is that the Dhamma is so deep, it doesn't matter what kind of life you have. It doesn't matter if you're the most wealthy person in the world. It doesn't matter if you have all the power in the world. Whatever you have in this world, the Dhamma is still goes far beyond anything you can have in this world. And this, of course, is the point here with the Buddha's teaching. He's making this point that it doesn't matter what you are like, what your world life is like. The Dhamma is there to help anyone because it goes much deeper than anything you can have in human existence. So it's like a proclamation that this Dhamma is worthwhile for anyone. That is really the purpose of this. So, on hearing the Dhamma, he acquires faith in the Tathagata. Faith, first of all, the word faith, I must admit I don't really like the word faith so much. The word faith is very often used in religions like Christianity. You have faith in God, right? You have faith in Jesus Christ. But the idea of faith in Christianity is very different from the idea of faith in Buddhism, right? In Christianity is like, faith means I will believe regardless of what happens, even if it is completely, seemingly completely strange, doesn't make any sense, even if it goes against all of scientific research, even if it goes against common sense, I will still believe, right? This is kind of the idea of Christian faith, right? That's not how Buddhists work. If something doesn't make any sense, you're encouraged to ask what's going on, right? If something doesn't fit with our scientific knowledge, you want to figure out why it doesn't fit with scientific knowledge. What is the clash? What is the problem here? So the Buddhist idea of faith is very different from the Christian idea of faith. And that's why I think faith is actually not a very good word. I'm not sure about Malaysia, but certainly in the West, these Christian words are so ingrained in people's consciousness, right? They have a certain meaning because you've grown up in a society that's imbued with Christian ideas. You know, in Western society, you had Christian ideas around for 1,500, 2,000 years very often. So the whole culture is imbued with these ideas. So words often have a very strong, very clear meaning. So I tend to prefer using non-Christian vocabulary, and confidence is much more true to the Buddhist idea. You get confidence. There's something beautiful there, right? You hear the Dhamma, it makes sense. You actually think that it will lead to happiness. You think it will lead away from suffering. And it gives you confidence that is the case. And that is why we then start practicing the Buddha's teaching. So confidence, in my opinion, is much better than the idea of faith. And then, when you have confidence, it also thinks about things like rebirth. Okay, we don't need to say we have faith in rebirth. That implies kind of blind belief, right? It's rather more like, okay, I take the idea seriously. I have confidence in this idea because the Buddha said so. And then I wish to keep investigating to see if it is true. The confidence really is the crucial issue here. So you hear that Dhamma, and on hearing it, you recognize there's something powerful here, something beautiful. And because there's something powerful and beautiful, you gain confidence in that teaching. So that is part of it. But there is more than just hearing the Dhamma itself. It is not often enough. Often, when I read the suttas, yes, they are beautiful, but it's also a little bit dry when you just read something, right? Just reading it doesn't give you that sense that these things actually are alive. So there's an additional point to this confidence. An additional point is to actually see the living example of what Buddhism is all about. And of course, at the time of the Buddha, they would approach the Buddha, and they would be around the Buddha, and in his presence, they would be able to see something beautiful, right? They would see someone who doesn't have any defilements, and the Buddha expressively says that we should do that. We should investigate it. We should ask, do you see any defilements in me? Do you see any greed? Do you see any hatred? Do you see any delusion? He specifically says that. He invites us to investigate it personally. And when you do that, and when you see that these things are not there, right, What does it mean that there are no defilements? What it means is that you have metta, you have compassion, you have kindness, you have understanding, you have wisdom. That is what you see there. And the Buddha invites you to investigate it. And that to me is always the most powerful thing in the Buddha's teaching. It's when the qualities, what you see in Buddhism, matches up with the teachings and they go together. And that is when it really gives rise to very strong confidence. Because you can actually see the results in with your very own eyes. And then you think, wow, there's something here. I too would like to have some of that happiness that the Buddha has, right? And you look at the Buddha, gee, he's different. Maybe he's got something I too would like to have. And so you get confidence in the teachings. And then of course even more so when you start practicing and you start to see the benefits, that is even more powerful then. So that is about confidence. You gain this confidence when you hear the Dhamma. Then when you possess that confidence, so this will happen somewhere during your life, or maybe not during this life, maybe next life or whatever. Then you consider the house of life is crowded and dusty. Life gone forth is wide open. So what do you think? Is house of life crowded and dusty then? Is that how it feels? Yes. Okay. So the idea here, I think it is still true today, but particularly at the time of the Buddha, it was crowded, right? You often had a small house, the whole family would live together, many generations, right? Grandparents, children, everyone together, and everything would be going on in this little house. You can imagine how children running around back and forth, there wasn't a moment's peace to be had, So it was really crowded. And when it is so crowded, it tends to give rise to defilements, right? And that's the idea of dusty in Buddhism. It's the raja, is the passions, the dust of passions and anger. But everybody's around you all the time. You can easily get upset, right? Oh, you're messing around, stop doing that, right? This is wrong. You don't have enough perspective. You're not able to stand back enough to be able to see your defilements. You just react habitually because people are just too close, there's too much, right? And I'm sure you all know what that is like in ordinary life. And you're with your colleagues all the time, with your family all the time. And it's impossible never to lose your temper, right? Is anyone here who never loses their temper? I'd be very impressed if somebody raised their hand. But it's just, this is life, right? Because everything is so close together, it's so hard never to lose your temper a little bit. You get a bit irritated, a little bit upset. And this is the dustiness of daily life. You have all this crowd around you, and you have the dust of the defilements arising. And because he considers this, then he says, life gone forth is wide open. You get distance, right? You are in the open, you are away from other people. You gain a sense of perspective. And this is one of the things that I love about my little kuti, my little hut at Bodhidharma Monastery in Perth. Right in my kuti, there's nobody around, right? I'm just by myself. I can't see anyone else. You get a sense of perspective. You get that distance from others. And then you can think clearly. And when you can think clearly, it's so much easier to have compassion and to have a kind heart. Because you know that this is really what is important in life. Too much interaction makes it difficult to always be kind. So this is why the life gone forth works better, because somehow it's easier to have a sense of perspective on the defilements and keep them under control. Okay, so then it is hard to live the holy life utterly perfect and pure as a polished shell, precisely for that reason. And then you think, suppose I shave off my hair and beard and put on the yellow robe, this one here, not really yellow, right, more like brown or whatever, and put on whatever robe, and go forward from the whole life into homelessness. And this is the ideal of the monastic, is to be homeless one. Not an ideal that is so often seen these days. It is, I have been living and staying at Bodhidharma Monastery for 20 years, and it's like, after 20 years, it's almost like, it becomes a bit like home, right? You've got to be careful there. You lose that sense of homelessness. But sometimes it's nice just to move away and go somewhere else and travel a little bit. You get this feeling that you haven't got any real home. One of my fellow monks at Bodhidharma Monastery, at Sujato, he has one bag like this, right? His bag is a bit larger than mine. Mine is very small. He's got one bag which is a bit larger than this, and he takes all his possessions going into that yard. All his possessions, right? Everything in the whole world goes into that bag. So when he travels, when he leaves the monastery, he has everything with him and he's gone. He might never return again. He's got everything with him. Isn't that great? There's something beautiful about that. There's something very freeing. And you will see this in the next passage further down. And this is kind of the monastic ideal. You have everything with you that you own goes into your big bag. His bowl too fits into his bag, right? He doesn't have a bowl like me, he has a small bowl, which is very wise, and he's able to take everything with him. So this is that ideal of homelessness, and it gives you a sense of freedom, liberation, not being tied down anywhere, always being able to move where the situation is suitable for practice, right? And that's what it's about. It's about practicing. It's about improving the wholesome and declining in the unwholesome. So whenever you are improving the wholesome, you know you're doing the right thing, and you should be doing that. And this gives you that opportunity. Okay, so first of all, he thinks about this. Maybe I should become a monastic. And often it takes a long time from the first thought, the first idea, to actual reality. Right? It can take many, many years. It's something that comes gradually on you. As you keep on practicing, you become more and more serious. Until one day, you're ready to take the plunge, right? Okay, I'm going to try this out. One of the great things about Buddhism is that even when you become a monastic, you are allowed to reverse that and go back to lay life. So if you find this terrible, then you have a chance to go back again. Which is, I think, is good, because you don't feel so trapped in the monastic life. On a later occasion, abandoning, so you abandon a small and large fortune, right? You give up your possessions, and give up your relatives in the sense of having any close, instead of in the sense of living with them all the time. You put on the yellow robe and you go forward from the home life into homelessness. So, that is the introduction to the sutta. Now the person has become a monk or a nun, or at least you have become a Buddhist, and now you are ready to start the training as a monastic, right? And that's what comes next. So before we go on to that, let's just do a little bit of meditation here, just to gain a bit of perspective. actually. These are the things that we actually have to do, right? And this is how it starts off. Okay, so having thus gone forward and possessing the biggest training and way of life, abandoning the killing of living beings, he abstains from killing living beings. With rod and weapon laid aside, conscientious, merciful, he abides compassionate to all living beings. Abandoning the taking of what is not given, he abstains from taking what is not given, taking only what is given, inspecting only what is given. By not stealing, he abides in purity. Abandoning in celibacy, he observes celibacy, living apart, abstaining from the vulgar practice of sexual intercourse. Okay. So the first thing, now we are moving into the domain of sila. This is called sila in Pali, and sila is very often translated into English as virtue or morality. But actually the word sila is broader than just virtue and morality. So the word sila has to do with one's character, right? One's personality. So what you can say that this is about character, who you are as a person. It's about your inner life. What is your kind of your default action, your default being, your default character life? Have you got a good heart? Or have you got a heart which perhaps is not so good? Exactly what is your character like? So it's really about one's character. So what we are seeing here is, you could say, the development of one's personality, right? The development of one's character. To move from someone who is not so pure to becoming more pure inside, a more beautiful person, basically. That's what it's about. So keep that in mind. It's not, sometimes virtue, morality can sound like just a way of acting, right? It's not just a way of acting, it's about your entire inside life. Transformation of your psychological state, basically, is what it concerns, what it is about. So, it starts off then with becoming a bhikkhu and possessing the bhikkhu's training and way of life. And the bhikkhu's training and way of life, so often this will be said to be like keeping the precepts, the patimokkha of the monastic, following all the rules, etc. But I think it's very important to remember that Buddhism is not just about keeping rules, right? Often there can be too much emphasis on rules. I mean, rules are important. I'm not suggesting we should chuck out the rules and do whatever we like. But I'm saying that rules are just part and parcel of what this is about. The rules are like pointing us in a certain direction. But the real training and the real way of life in Buddhism is actually about the training of the mind, right? This gradual training is really what it means. All of this that we're doing here, that is what the bhikkhu's way of life and the bhikkhu's training actually is about. It's important to remember that. Sometimes I always found that, particularly in monastic life, and often in Theravada Buddhism, there's incredible focus on rules, right? You can't do this, you can't do that. Okay, fine, please, rules are there, and of course they are to be followed. But it's not enough, right? It's not enough just to follow a set of rules. You don't become kind-hearted by following rules. You become just what you do, you become good at following rules, right? So you become by following rules. You become kind-hearted by, yes, you follow the rules, but you also do something more. You develop your kindness, you develop your mind, you develop the goodness inside. And that is what this training is about. It's a real development, and it's not just about rules. So please keep this in mind. And it's the same thing with the 5 precepts, right? If you are a lay person, and I'm sure many of you here will keep the 5 precepts quite regularly. Now, the 5 precepts are just rules, right? So, of course we have to keep those. But it's more than just that, more than just keeping rules. Ultimately, it's about kindness, it's about goodness, coming from goodness inside. That's what really matters. And if you come from kindness, then the keeping of the rules is automatic anyway. You can't really break the rules if you are a kind-hearted person. It's almost impossible, because you're already inclined in the right direction. So the rules are a guidance. Because sometimes in life we lose the plot, we forget what we're supposed to be doing, we forget, we are deluded, or we get angry, whatever. And when the mind isn't in the right place, it's very useful to have a rule just to remind you, okay, this is going too far. If you have a kind heart, the rule keeping is pretty much automatic. So it's much more than keeping rules. So what is it then that we're supposed to do? This is what we're supposed to be doing. So this is the virtue and morality aspect of the Buddhist path. Abandoning the killing of living beings, right? He abstains from killing living beings. With rod and weapon laid aside, a conscientious, merciful, he bides compassionate to all living beings. And this is parallel to the first precept, right? When you say the first precept, you say, I abstain from the taking of life. That's what the first precept is about. But you will recognize here straight away that there is much more here than just not the taking of life, right? Not taking of life is part of this. There's more to this than the not taking of life. It's not exactly the same. So this here is a much more complete expression of the Buddhist idea of not taking life than the first precept is. The first precept is just a brief. This is explaining this in full. So, and the beauty of what it says here is that it's not just about the negative side. It's not just about not taking life. It's about laying aside rod and weapon. Rod is danda, basically means punishment. To be conscientious, right? Lunging means like to have a sense of shame in regard to these kind of things. You feel a bit shameful, you feel a bit guilty if you do something which isn't right. It feels like you are sullying your mind, you're making yourself dirty if you don't actually practice properly. It doesn't feel good, right? It's that sense of shame there when you do things wrong. And then you kind of recoil from those bad things because of that. But even more importantly, it says here that you are merciful, right? This is like compassionate, and you abide compassionate to all living beings. And this is really what the real practice of non-violence is about. This is the idea of not killing living beings. It's not just about not harming living beings. It's not just about avoiding the bad, it's about doing the good, right? Being actively compassionate towards living beings. That is what it's about. And of course, we can see that when you practice in this way, if you are actively compassionate, if you're actively kind towards all living beings, it means very easy to keep the first precept. That if you come from a heart of compassion, you cannot really fail to be kind. And killing living beings really is completely out of your reach because you are coming from this beautiful compassion and saying that. So remember that. It's about the active side of things. And it's amazing if you are compassionate to all living beings. Sometimes the slightest little things that you do in life, beautiful little things, can have a very powerful impact on you. I've noticed that in my own life. Sometimes you are compassionate to the animals right around you, and sometimes you're compassionate to an insect. I remember one occasion specifically when I was in the monastery at Luschendorf, where we have the showers and that sort of thing, and I was just going into the toilet cubicle, and I was looking into the toilet, and there was an insect in the toilet, right? And an insect in the toilet basically means certain death for the insect. It was lying in the water, lying on its back, and kind of wriggling its legs, trying to get out, but there's nothing it can do sitting in the water in the toilet. So I knew if I was going to use that toilet at that point, the insect was absolutely sure to die and to be flushed down the toilet. So just naturally, I just get a piece of toilet paper and I hook onto that insect, I pull it out of the toilet, and then release it outside instead. And sometimes when you do that, when I was there, I didn't do it because somebody was looking at me to see if I was doing the right thing. I wasn't doing it because I felt an obligation to save life. I just did it because it felt right. It felt good to do that. And because it felt good to do it, it gave me a sense of happiness and contentment afterwards. It felt good. And it's such a small act, right? Tiny little thing, little insect. But you know that the insect doesn't want to die, right? It wants to live like everybody else. Just by helping that little insect, you get a sense of joy. And to me, it just reminded me of the power of of kindness and goodness, right? You're kind to something so simple, that's so basic, and that is enough to give you a sense of happiness and joy in life. So remember that, because in life there are so many opportunities to be kind, so many opportunities to be compassionate. Every day you can help somebody a little bit, say a kind word, do something good, whether it's in your family life or in your work life or with your spiritual companions in the VGF, whatever it is. There's so many opportunities. Remember, in fact, you could even say that whenever you do anything, whenever you do any act, always try to make it an act that comes from compassion and kindness, rather than just being any act that you just do for the sake of doing it. Always remind yourself, why are you doing this? And try to come from a sense of compassion inside. And this is how you can kind of transform and make your whole life into a spiritual life. Remembering the intention in everything you're doing. When you go to work, why do you work, right? And then what you can do to transform even the ordinary work into something beautiful. Remember that there is a customer there at the end who will receive the product that your company is making. Remember that you have fellow employees that you can help out, right? So when you do anything, and think of the consequences of that. Do it well, do it with your heart. Have a good intention for the customer. Don't do it because I want a promotion, I want a higher salary. If you do it for that reason, then it doesn't really give that sense of happiness and joy inside. But if you do your work because you're thinking of other people, then it becomes part of your spiritual practice. And I think, this is just my guess, but if you do it in that way, and you do things out of kindness, actually that is often the way how to get advancement and promotion in life, right? Because people will see that you're coming from the right place. You will feel like people won't be afraid of you. If you are very competitive and trying to get on in life and trying to beat everybody else, people will say, oh, this person is a little bit too much, right? They'll be a bit worried about you. But if you just do things because you want to be kind, people won't feel threatened by you. And when they don't feel threatened by you, then often you are the one who kind of has the luck to get the promotion. And if you don't get the promotion, you don't care anyway, because you're doing the right thing, right? Win-win situation. So very, very, I observe that in my life sometimes. I know some people who are like that, they're very competitive, and they just do the work because they love their work so much, right? They just do the thing for the right reason. And often they are so incredibly successful there. There's one of the classic example is a man in Norway who wants to start a forest monastery in Norway. I feel a bit sorry for him because he's been trying to get me to come to start a monastery with him, but I'm refusing all the time. But he's a very good-minded person, and he made a lot of money early on in his life by starting a business, and this business grew, and eventually it was sold off to a multinational company, Reuters Thompson, big information company based in Canada or something like that. And it sold off, and they made heaps of money. And then he was interviewed afterwards and said, oh, you must be really satisfied, having sold off this company for so much money. And he said, no, not really, I didn't do this for the money. I did this out of love, and the money was just a consequence of the love and the fun of doing the business right. So this is attitude. You do it for the love. You do it because you're helping out. You do it because you're doing something positive for the world. And then things tend to turn out beautifully. And you become successful, even if you don't want to be successful. So it becomes very nice. And then he sold his company, and then he quit his job, right? Because he wasn't really all interested in working for a large multinational company. And then he started some other business, and now he's working with some other business. A wonderful thing that is. So this is how you then can transform your actions into something beautiful in this way. And if you do it rightly, I have found in my life that you can almost make your whole life into a spiritual path, right? Almost everything you do, everything you say, everything you think, every act you do, if you are mindful, you can make it into an intention of kindness one way or another. And then everything is transformed and becomes very nice. So at least you can move in that direction. So remember that. It's about doing good, not just about avoiding the bad. And often this is something we tend to forget in the Buddhist practice. Okay. Second one, abandoning the taking of what is not given. In other words, abandoning stealing, right? You abstain from taking what is not given. accepting only what is given and not taking anything else. By doing this, you abide in purity. And again here, the opposite side, the good side, is not spelled out so much. But of course, the opposite side of stealing is generosity, right? When you steal something, it means you're greedy, or I want to have something which actually isn't yours, right? The sense of greed inside it. But when you're generous, it's the opposite of greed, right? You're sharing out the possession of other people. So generosity is the opposite. And I think the reason why generosity is not mentioned here is because it is mentioned so many other places, and it is such a fundamental part of the Buddhist path, right? I was just mentioning this morning, just before, and I mentioned it also yesterday, how giving is one of those few things that are mentioned at the very beginning of the Buddhist path. Right view actually specifically mentions the idea of giving. That shows you that giving is very important, right? It wouldn't be mentioned specifically at the beginning of the path unless it was a very important factor. The very fact that it's there, mentioned at the very start, means that the idea of generosity is a very fundamental part of the Buddha's teaching. So please keep that in mind. And again, this is the opposite of taking what is given, of stealing. And of course, if you read about people who have practiced a long way on the path, one of the ways of seeing whether somebody is well practiced is to see how much generosity they have, right? Someone who is very generous, someone who is always sharing, someone who is always giving of themselves, is usually someone who has gone a long way on the path. So you can tell that too by people's willingness and willingness to share with others and to be kind in this way, whether they are where they're at. And the closer people are to awakening, the more kind of selfless they are, and the more willing they are to always share and to be kind and generous. So this is another way we can look at that. Okay, so that is the second of the precepts, and explained here in a bit more detail. And then the third one, abandoning in celibacy. It's not really in celibacy, it's basically the correct translation there would be abandoning all sexual activity. That is really the right way of translating that. So abandoning sexual activity, he observes celibacy, living apart, abstaining from they have the word vulgar here, which is not, in my opinion, a very good word. It doesn't mean vulgar in the way it is often used. It means more like common or ordinary, right? That's what it actually means. Vulgar has a kind of negative slant, and this doesn't mean ordinary. So the ordinary practice of sexuality. So, again, this of course is, now we're talking about monastic life here. So this is what monastic life is about. And the opposite in this case, the opposite from this is to be a renunciant, right? To renounce things. And this is the opposite thing here. And to renounce things means, of course, first of all, it means to renounce things in the physical sense. So you go off and you live in the forest somewhere, you live far away from other people. That is kind of the initial type of renunciation. You give things up. But more deeply, this also refers to here, we're already moving towards the mental renunciation. Because the only way we can live this kind of life is by renouncing some of these desires inside. If you have too many desires inside, it's very hard to live this kind of life. So you have to learn to turn your mind around and to look at things in a new way so as to reduce these things. You are renouncing it. It's a mental act of giving these things up. This renunciation is the opposite that we're seeing here. It's like the positive side of being celibate in this way. So, those are the actions of the body. This is the first part of virtue in the Buddhist training. And please remember the positive side of things. And if you remember the positive side of things, the importance of generosity, the importance of compassion, then you can make much, much more out of this path than you can other ones. One of the main reasons why we try to avoid the negative things is because the negative things often make you feel bad, right? So by taking away the negative things, it means you don't have these waves that hold you down in life. But it's by doing the good things, by doing the positive things, and we often create happiness and joy inside ourselves. So by avoiding the negative, we take away the waves. By doing the good, we are kind of making ourselves light and giving the joy and happiness in life. So these things goes together, cutting off the waves, and kind of filling the balloon with helium, so they can kind of fly up, and you can feel light and joyous inside. So the two sides going together are very important, and that's when you create a good character. That's when you create a personality that is truly beautiful in life, and then you are fulfilling this idea of sila at the first stage. Okay, so it is almost 11:13. I'm not going to go on to right speech. It's coming next. We'll maybe do that after the lunch break. So I think this is a good place to stop. Otherwise, we'll be going too far. So let's take a break and have something to eat, and we'll see you again at 1.